Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the hearing to order. And we're going to acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory and the home and the traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Cree, Dakota people, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 1 territory. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this morning. Joining us via Zoom are other panel members, Dan Knight and Bill Moretsky. The assessor this morning is Jennifer Martins, and our recording secretary is Belen Rojo. This morning, we'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested has been described in each application and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicants and the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised, comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench, now referred to as King's Bench, in the matters pertaining to application from exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this morning, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant. Following the swearing in, we'll then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the other applicant may have. And that'll be the applicant's testimony, followed by questions. Each side will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application is brought forward, the applicant may leave. Process will repeat for each item on the docket this morning. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. We'll have the assessor sworn in, or our secretary, and then we can swear in Ms. Leslie or affirm that.
Please state your full name.
Jennifer Suzanne Martins.
And you affirm the evidence about presents is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your full name.
Kenneth Thomas Leslie.
And you affirm the evidence about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
Bear with me for 1 second. Okay. The first property we're going to deal with is 1560 Main Street. Madam Assessor, whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property.
Thank you. This is roll number 14072026100, 1560 Main Street. For the reference date of April 1st, 2021, the assessed value is $606,000. This is a strip mall. It is one building with two premises, 1 story. It was built in 1962 with a wall height of 12 feet. The land area is 9,947 square feet, and the plan area is 4,038 square feet. On the third page, we have some rent comparables. These are similar in that they are strip malls with also a tenant class of C2. And they range from $10 a square foot to $12.95 a square foot. On page 4, we have the income workup. We have a leasable area of 3,935 square feet with a potential rent of $42,181 with a vacancy loss at 4%. It gives us an effective gross income of $40,494. We have 3% for the expenses with a shortfall at $9 per square foot, giving us a net operating income of $37,862. We've applied an overall capitalization rate of 6.25%, giving us a capitalized value of $605,792, which rounds to $606,000. On page 6, we have some capitalization rate information. Following that, we've got the mailer that is on file. And on the back page, there's an overhead view of this strip mall. Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Leslie, questions of the assessor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Martins, the effective year built on page 1 of the subject property, 1962.
Yes,
So this would be this property is 60 years old.
yes.
Did you inspect the property?
No, I did not.
And the leasable area, I think we've agreed, is 3,935 square feet.
Yes.
On page 3, your comparables are all properties in the 1970 or 80s. Is that correct?
Yes.
Page 4, your workup on the potential rent, that is based on the mass appraisal system.
Yes, good.
So those aren't the actual rents.
No, they're not.
Nor is the vacancy the actual vacancy.
No, it's not good.
And then you've used a capitalization of 6.25.
Yes.
And on page 6, you've included the capitalization rate study.
Yes.
And for strip, is it correct to say that the low is 5.75 to a high of 7.5?
Yes. Depending on which one you go in.
Which group is conducting the study?
Yes.
Do you know, is the calculation of the capitalization rate, and I believe it's comparison of sale prices. Do they use is it based on the potential rent or based on the actual net income that the property is generating? Or do you know?
I can't say for Colliers and CBRE and Cushman Wakefield. And with the city, it's my understanding that it is with the sale and with the actual income.
So the actual income is generating these capitalization rates.
Yes.
So if I was to take the actual net income of no, those are my questions.
I thank you. Ms. Knight, questions of the assessor?
No questions at this time.
I thank you. Mr. Baratsky, questions of the assessor?
I have no questions.
And I don't think I have any other than Ms. Martin's. Everything is model driven. No overrides or anything?
Yes, everything is model driven, there are no overrides.
All right. Mr. Leslie, we're ready for your presentation.
I believe you have my submission, which includes a summary of the subject property as before the Board of Revision on page 2. And on page 4, I have done my own workup for the value of the subject property. But again, I'm using projected potential rent of $11 a square foot. This particular property had a vacancy of 2,845 square feet for a period of 18 months prior to the applicable reference date. And the tenant that now occupies the property is not a national tenant. It's Annie's Attic. They sell secondhand clothing for the purposes of funding an animal shelter. And so while I've used the potential rent at $11 a square foot, which I believe is somewhat less than the assessor's amount on my page 4. Actually, my amount is higher, and I've used the vacancy shortfall of 4% and $9 a square foot for big and 3% for other. I've used a much higher capitalization rate of 7.55%. The reason I used a much higher capitalization rate is for all the reasons I've previously mentioned. The age of the property, the location. This is North Main. I only know it because I go to Braca for lunch sometimes across the street. And it's next door to the transit. I don't know what they do there at the transit. This was originally a Perth depot, and is since Perth was sold and converted. They converted this to a strip mall. It's gone through a number of tenants. As I mentioned, there was a vacancy that for 18 months prior to it, and that's what I believe is generating a higher cap rate, which is within the parameters as established by it's within the high, which was, I think, with Coldwell Banker of 7.5%. If I was to take the actual net income and multiply it by the assessor's cap rate, I would get a much lower value than I am estimating for the subject property. So I believe a fair and reasonable estimate of the value as at April 1st, 2021 is $515,000. That is my submission.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Martin's questions of the applicant.
Yes. Now, if we're looking at the range of capitalization rates and you went to the highest one on the chart, do you feel that it is reasonable for this property to be at the highest capitalization rate?
I think it's more than reasonable. I'd pick a higher rate if there was a higher number on the chart.
So you simply went to the number on the chart. You didn't feel that it was appropriate to use whatever number that you thought was reasonable?
Initially, I did use a higher number, but then I didn't think the board would accept it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, questions of the applicant?
Yeah, you said 7.55 cap rate, correct?
I believe that's
Yes.
the number yes.
So which chart are you referring to for that cap rate? The
That would
chart
be,
that
that
the
would-
appraiser set?
that the assessor page 6.
So page 6, the highest cap rate there is 7.5 for
Right,
strip mall. And you
So-
chose 7.55.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bill, questions?
Yes, you have virtually, you agree with the assessor on the leasable area. And it seems like you even have a little bit higher net operating income. So you're not really, your concerns regarding the actual vacancy issue that you had brought up, you're not really applying that to your equations here, correct?
Well, I'm using the accepted methodology, but for the vacancy, I'm also accepting the standard of 4%, but I think that's reflected in a higher cap rate. I could either charge a greater vacancy, and it's 18 months, and I could. There is some decisions where chronic vacancy would justify 25%, or I can just increase the cap rate. The effect is going to be the same. To an earlier question, if I use 7.5%, my number becomes 518,533. And I believe that number would be acceptable to the taxpayer as well.
So, okay, so the higher cap rate that you are proposing is due to bad location, the effective age being high, old, for lack of a better term, and the vacancy. That's why you wanted at 7 point. Is it 7.5 or 7.55?
Well, I am now amending my submission to be 7.5 because there's evidence to show that that's the highest rate in the marketplace. And so I'm changing my estimated fair market value to 518,533.
518,533. Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
I have no questions. Either party wants to mention?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Leslie?
No thanks.
Okay. We'll go on to the next property, which is 1717 Pembina Highway. Ms. Martins, whenever you're ready, I understand that there was the non-co-op issue, but you have withdrawn that.
Yes, thank
All
you.
right, so the floor is yours.
This is roll number 030-6556-1000. This is 1717 Pembina Highway. For the reference date of April 1st, 2021, we have an assessed value of $8,245,000. The parcel of use on this is neighborhood shopping center. We have 2 buildings with 13 premises. We have an actual years built range from 1978 to 1981, and effective years built range from 1978 to 1990. The wall height ranges from 11 to 13 feet. The land area is 184,776 square feet. The plan area is 51,827 square feet. On page 2, we see that there was a sale quite a while ago in 2010 for $5,900,000. On page 3, I've given rent comparables. And I've done comparables for the different tenant classes because we have standard finish, retail warehouse, and standard restaurant in the building. And I've given comparables for the standard finish, ranging from $16 a square foot to $18.70 a square foot. For the standard restaurant, I've got 3 comparables, one for $19.50 a square foot and 2 for $20 per square foot. And for the retail warehouse, the rents range from $9.25 per square foot to $11.50 per square foot. On page 4, we have the workup. And it shows that the total leasable area is 51,736 square feet with a potential rent of $656,033. We have a vacancy on this at 5%, giving us an effective gross income of $623,231. With 3% for expenses and a shortfall of $9, we have a net operating income of $581,253. We've applied a cap rate of 7.05%, giving us $8,244,723, which rounds to $8,245,000. And that's what I have. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Leslie, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Martins, we've discussed the subject property.
Yes.
The non-compliance has been withdrawn. Things happen, information gets missed. You would actually have a copy of the 2020 submission now in your brief. Income and expense questionnaire.
In my brief?
Yeah. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe I added it to it.
Yeah, I don't have that in my brief.
Okay. But there is no non-compliance.
Correct.
Okay. Again, the assessment was conducted on the mass appraisal
Yes, it was.
based on potential comparable rents. And the cap rate used was for a neighborhood shopping center. And this again was based on the study, based on sales, on actual net income. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
That's my submission.
I thank you.
Or my questions, thanks.
Ms. Knight, questions?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Moretsky?
As I have a question on the effective years built. So it's got 1978 to 1990.
Yes.
So why is there a wide range there?
I didn't find all of the notes regarding the construction. But usually when that happens, it's because we have, if you notice, there's 2 buildings on there. So the 2 buildings would have had different construction dates. So this would reflect that there were different buildings built at different times.
Okay, so one building then had renovations done to it since they were kind of built at the same time, right?
Yes, that's
I
what
mean, yeah. They were built 3 years apart.
Yeah.
Correct? and then one had more renovations than the other?
That's what I'm assuming.
All right. Okay, no, and that was reflected in the cap rate that you would use?
Yes, the cap rate was generated through mass appraisal.
Mass appraisal, meaning what?
Computer assisted mass appraisal is how we generate our values. We use a model that,
Okay, I always heard it as the model, so that's the first time I've heard that term used, mass appraisal, that's all.
yes,
Same thing then, correct?
same thing.
Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. Martins, where can I find the rate that was used in your table?
I'm sorry, what?
The cap rate of 7.05?
Well, our table, we don't use it as a tool to point at a number and apply it. The model looked at the characteristics of the property and applied a cap rate that worked within the model to.
But looking at the chart then,
Yes,
where would it fall into?
well, it is above the 80th percentile. So what we have here is that if you have 100 of these, the majority of them would be between the 20th percentile and the 80th percentile. So this one does fall higher than usual.
Mhm. But like you say, it's model generated.
Yes, so according to the characteristics that we have in our system, this is what has been produced.
All right. I thank you. Mr. Leslie, your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to amend my presentation. Now that the assessor has accepted that the taxpayer submitted the income and expense information, and I've included it with my brief.
Do we have copies of it, Mr. Leslie?
It is in my brief, the income. It's after I've numbered the pages up to page 6. Then there's the page 7.
Okay, Mr. Leslie.
Page 11, I believe.
Page 11
Page 11.
is the income statement.
Okay.
And this is the income statement for the subject property that the department is now accepting. And it shows on page 3 of that, it shows adjusted net income of $564,055.58. And so if I was to accept the assessor's capitalization rate of 7.05 on page 4 of the brief, 564,055 divided by 705 is $8,780,000. So actual net income generated divided by the assessor's cap rate. And so I'd like to amend my submission originally as $7,008,000 to $8 million. I'm in agreement with the assessor on the formula, on the area, the description, the age.
Okay, Mr. Leslie, just give us a little recap how you get to the 8 million. Okay, so NOI.
So
given us.
So my question of the assessor is are cap rates generated? And cap rates are generated based on actual sales using actual net income generated by the property. Okay, so if we use the actual net income generated by this property on or about the reference date, so it's for the year ending December 2020, which is on page 3 of their submission, which has now been accepted, it's $564,055. If I divide that by the assessor's cap rate of 7.05%, 564,055 divided by 0.0705, I get $8 million.
Okay. And that's your presentation.
That's my submission.
Ms. Martin's questions?
Yes. In that equation, are you including things such as leasing commissions and mortgage interest?
I'm taking their net income.
Okay, so these are, some of these are expenses that we don't accept as being appropriate expenses to be including in for our NOI. Is that, are you including those in your, they're stated here in the income statement, so are you including those?
I'm taking their published NOI. If they're included, then they're included. Yes.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Knight, questions? Mr. Leslie.
I do not, the City of Winnipeg appraiser asked my question, so that's good.
Okay. Bill?
No, I do not have any questions.
So, Mr. Leslie, you're accepting the cap rate of 7.05. It's just a question of NOI.
Well, I don't think it is a question of NOI because the assessor has answered that the cap rates that are driven by the model are based on actual net income of the properties. And I doubt that a purchaser nor the vendor would exclude any expenses from the NOI when they're representing that information in order to offer it for sale. The purchaser and the vendor are going to examine the financial statements of the subject property and develop a purchase price, and they're going to include all the expenses in developing their purchase price. I don't think they exclude anything. In fact, I would submit that a purchaser is going to include some things that aren't in the income statement.
All right. Summation either party?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Leslie, you're okay?
I think I've summed up.
Okay. We'll go to the next property, which is 180 St. Anne's Road. Martin, whenever you're ready.
This is rule number 080016530000. 180 St. Anne's Road. The reference date is April 1st, 2021. The assessed value is $2,498,000. This is a strip mall. The actual year built was 1989 with an effective year built at 1989. The wall height is 17 feet. The land area is 29,059 square feet, and the plan area is 9,680 square feet. We look at page 3. We have some comparables for the rental rates. We have standard finish and standard restaurant. So you'll see that there's examples that range for standard from $16.75 to $18 per square foot, and for the restaurant, $19.50 to $20.75. On page 4, we have our income workup. We have a leasable area of 9,566 square feet with a potential rent of $172,669. We have applied a 4% vacancy loss, which gives us an effective gross income of $165,762. We've applied 3% for expenses and a shortfall of $9 per square foot, giving us a net operating income of $157,345. We've applied an overall capitalization rate of 6.3%, giving us a capitalized value of $2,497,540, which rounds to the $2,498,000. At the back page, we can see pictures. There's an overhead shot, and then there's a street view. That's everything. Thank you very much.
I thank you. Mr. Leslie, questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Martins, again, the assessed value is conducted on the mass appraisal.
Yes.
Did you inspect the property?
No, I did not.
And the cap rate of 6.3%. How did you derive that number?
That's through the model.
And the age of this property is 1989, effective age.
That it's also the actual age. Yes.
Those are my questions.
I thank you. It's nice. Question.
No questions.
Bill, questions?
Again, the cap rate you have at 6.3. And that's just based on the mass appraisal, that you don't arbitrarily pick that number.
That is correct.
No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, just one little follow-up. The applicable cap rate of 6.3, is that based on the age also of the property?
Yes, when we're doing the cap rate, the age is taken into account, as is the neighborhood and other issues.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Leslie, your presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe you have my submission. I also used on my page 4 the model to derive a workup using 4% vacancy, $9 shortfall, 3% other, but I used a 6.8% cap rate, and I came up with my original submission of $2,212,000. That's on page 4. I believe we're in agreement on the age and description, location. The subject is a strip mall. The assessor in their brief has included the actual submission by the taxpayer, the income statement for the 2020 year. And on page 3 of that, the net income is $137,597. And if I divide that by the assessor's cap rate of 6.3%, I get a value of $2,184,000. So I am going to amend my submission and suggest that the purchaser would purchase the property for $2,184,000 at the applicable reference date. That's taking the actual net operating income and using the assessor's cap rate of 6.3%.
What was that number again for the actual, the NOI you're using?
It's on page 10 of the assessor's brief, 137, 597, 54 cents.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you, sir. Ms. Martins, questions of the applicant?
Yes, please. Sorry, I just need a moment to look at the expenses that are being included. Would you mind please speaking to the rent abatement? There's a lot of rent abatements here. Was there involved in this rent abatement from the income that was not brought in by the tenants? Did the owner have any support from the government through any of the government programs that were available in regards to supporting smaller businesses in regards to rent abatement and other such things?
There was under other revenue, income from government grant, 32,000. Just before net revenue.
Okay. Now, do you feel that it's appropriate to, when you're talking about a purchaser, are they going to be taking all of the rent abatement and all of those expenses into account if they're purchasing this, let's say, next year?
Well, I believe we're bound by the April 1st, 2021 reference date.
Fair. Is rent abatement due to extraordinary events a common item that you will see on spreadsheets that purchasers use when they're looking at purchasing a building?
I believe the evidence shows that the cap rates are established by looking at the actual NOI.
Yes, but we are now discussing what the appropriate NOI is.
And my evidence is that the appropriate NOI is the actual NOI. If it's an expense or a revenue, it will be included. I think they're all appropriate. And I think a purchaser would take into account everything.
Expenses or reduced. Do you feel that every purchaser has the same expenses or reductions in income that could be caused by adjustments in management or different management styles? May I give you an example?
Sure.
Such as mortgage interest. Does every purchaser have the same mortgage interest on a monthly or yearly basis as the entity that owned the property before them? Or is there perhaps an adjustment in the expenses in that regards.
My belief is that purchasers look for opportunities when they're purchasing properties. But those opportunities aren't factored into the purchase price. That's for their own benefit.
So in the situation where we might include mortgage interest, that should not be included in the net operating income. So when we're looking at all of these properties, mortgage interest should be an expense that perhaps is not applicable for net operating income.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Knight,
I have no questions.
Ms. Boretsky,
Yes, is mortgage interest included in this income as an expense?
Not on this property. It is on some of the other ones we've been looking at.
Oh, okay, I was actually asking the question of
Sorry.
the applicant.
Sorry.
that's okay.
As my evidence stated, the cap rates are generated by actual sales based on actual net income. An actual net income would include whatever expenses are to determine net income. As a professional accountant, you match revenues against expenses in the applicable period and are reported thereon. Those are the facts. In my original workup, I used the methodology and I used a higher cap rate to reflect the issues that I felt were with this specific property, not mass appraisal. The mass appraisal system is using cap rates based on actual net income. So if I'm going to use the mass appraisal cap rates, then I'm going to use, I think that it's appropriate to use the actual net operating income of the subject property to determine the subject property's assessment in the applicable reference year. What might happen in the future, well, that will be dealt in the next reference date.
So on these actual, in the income statement, the actual one that's attached to your presentation, is that based on 100% use of that leasable area of 9,566 square feet?
Yes, and I'll point you to page 8 of the assessor's submission, which is the taxpayer's income and expense questionnaire response. The first line is revenue, then rent revenue, then it shows base rent, gross potential. And so this income statement shows that this is what the property should earn if all the space is leased. It encompasses, to answer your question, it encompasses 100% of the property and all its entitlements.
Okay, and then what square foot number would they have applied in that equation?
I believe we're in agreement of,
But on their income statement, what they would have applied some kind of square foot number though.
I believe I'm in agreement with these 9,566 square feet is the leasable area. That's the number I used in my workup. And I believe also there is a rent roll attached to on page 12. of the rent roll. There is a summary occupied 9,566.
100% occupied then.
Yes.
Okay, just bear with me for a sec here. So then it says the rent revenue, base rent gross potential. That's kind of where it all starts there. 158,600. So they're applying best case scenario. But it's also 100% occupied in this submission. So why would you apply two different methodologies there? Why not just use actual all the way?
My original methodology was to use the accepted methodology by the department and the municipal board, but the issue is, what is the appropriate cap rate that a purchaser is going to use to purchase the property, or to make an offer, and the vendor will accept. And when I used the accepted methodology, I had used the cap rate on my page 4 of 6.8%. To arrive at a number of 2,000,002. The assessors used a cap rate of 6.3, and the evidence has shown that the cap rates were derived from actual NOI. So as a check, I look at the actual NOI that the taxpayer has submitted, use the assessor's cap rate, and I come up with a value of 2,184,000. And I would suggest that that is a better estimate than my first estimate.
Okay.
Can I have a second question? Sorry.
Absolutely.
So based on what you just said, your first evidence stated that you wanted a value of 2,212,000 with an NOI of 144,244 at 6.8. Your second evidence is saying an NOI of 137,597.54 at the city's NOI of 6.3, correct?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And just in hindsight, in looking at my brief, where I derived the 6.8% was from there was a 15-1 agreement in the 2020 reference year, and the cap rate used was 6.75.
Okay.
So that's why I used 6.8. I just rounded it.
I just wanted to confirm what was and what changed. That was all. Thank you.
Okay.
I have no questions. Either party wants summation?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to the next one, which is 511 St. Mary's Road. Martin, whenever you're ready.
This is roll number 080002115500. The address is 511 St. Mary's Road. As of the reference date, April 1st, 2021, the assessed value is $689,000. The parcel use applied to this is as strip mall. There's one building with 5 premises. The actual year built was 1957 with an effective year built of 1969 with a wall height of 14 feet. We have land area of 9,523 square feet and a plan area of 2,929 square feet. We also have basement space in this one at 1,019 square feet. On page 3, we have some comparables for both standard finish and standard restaurant. Standard finish is between $15 and $15.50. And the standard restaurant is also, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure which one this is. I made a mistake and I doubled up the comparables. So just scratch one of those. That's for the standard finish. If we look on page 4, we have the income workup. We have a potential rent of $47,087 for a leasable area of 4,010 square feet. We've applied a vacancy of 40%, which gives us an effective gross income of $45,204. With 3% for expenses and a shortfall of $9 per square foot, our NOI is $42,404. We've applied a capitalization rate of 6.15%, which gives us capitalized value of $689,496, which rounds to $698,000. On the back page, we have some pictures of the subject property. We have an overhead view. It's the property on the corner. And then we have a view from the front, from St. Mary's Road, and then a view from the side road, just to give a better demonstration, a better representation of what the property actually looks like. That's everything. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Leslie, question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Did you inspect the subject property, Mark?
No, I did not.
Are you familiar with the subject property and what has occurred over time with this particular property?
I believe in our discussions, we briefly touched on it, but no.
That this property has undergone a transformation. There was a residential component to it, and now it's strictly commercial. Is that correct?
That sounds familiar.
And the effective age of this property is 1969 or 50? Sorry.
The actual year built, we have as 1957, and we have an effective year built of 1969.
And I see in your submission on page 4 on potential rents.
Mm-hmm.
So those are not the actual rents, those are potential rents.
They are derived from the model.
And there is an amount allocated to the basement.
Yes, there is.
The basement includes mechanical areas?
Not as far as I am aware.
Now, on your page 8, you've included the taxpayer's submission. And they've noted that for the period ended February 28th, 2021, so just prior to the reference date, that the actual rent income was $39,463.
Yes.
And then there's a $1,800 recovery to a total of $41,263.
Yes.
but on your page 4, your potential rent is 47,087.
Yes,
And I believe the entire building is occupied.
that is what I've been led to believe as well.
And so would it be fair to say that your potential rent is more than the actual rent?
Yes,
Like page 4, 47,087 as compared to what they're actually collecting under their leases of on page 8 of 39,463.
yes. As I said, these were from the market, not actuals.
And then the cap rate again of 6.15 is model driven.
Yes, it is.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Knight?
Yeah, just to confirm, the rent income of 39,463 is including the reduction given for the period of 6 months to one tenant as per the COVID agreement, correct?
Yes,
We would say that that would be correct.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Boretsky?
Sorry, are we still asking the assessor questions, correct?
No. Yes, we are. I'm sorry. Yes, we are. No,
I
sorry.
hear different voices sometimes and I get the.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to point to something here. You make on page 4, you're making you're splitting out the restaurant and the standard finish, and we've been doing that for every one here. And it seems like that square foot potential number, in this case, it's lower than the standard finish. But I looked at some of the other ones, and sometimes it's higher. So yeah, can you explain a little bit the difference between the standard finish and the restaurant finish, in terms of what it should be valued?
Oh, I believe on this one, if I'm not mistaken, the restaurant is Boyo. And it is, I don't believe that's a commercial chain. Like, it's not like a McDonald's, Starbucks, Subway. So traditionally, you can command a higher rent if you have one of the big, strong national chains. So I believe that was taken into account when we worked on the standard restaurant, because it's not one of those big brand name. If you bring in a Starbucks, you have a different amount of, the tenant will have a different amount of income than you will like a local business or a non-chain.
Shouldn't that be consistent then for every time you consider a potential rent, but you could get big chain?
But when we look at who the tenant is, and we are putting in for like when we're putting in for how we do business tax, we try to be equitable, and it's not fair to have Subway, McDonald's, Tim Hortons, and all of those big chain names at par with local tenants or family restaurants and things like that, because it's not the same. It's not equitable.
So these factors that we just discussed, for example, you input that into this mass appraisal system. And that's how it spits out its number?
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
I have no questions. Mr. Leslie, your presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I believe you have my submission, and on my page 4, I did a standard workup for the leasable area with a revenue potential of $11 a square foot, which I think is slightly more than, or no, it is more than the actual rent generated by the property. The actual rent generated property is $8.72 a square foot. That's because we have basement space, we have mechanical space, and we've got a property that was built in 1957 that's undergone some transition from a residential component to a retail commercial component. I've then on my page 4 applied the standard factors: 4% vacancy, $9 a square foot, 3%. And where I differ from the assessor is I've used a 6.6% cap rate, not the 6.15. And the reason why I used a higher cap rate is because on page 6 of my brief is the workup of the assessment department in the previous reference period using a cap rate of 7.05%. So the cap, I've dropped the cap rate somewhat because during the cap rates during the reference period were dropping. So I dropped it from 7.05 to 6.6, but not to the 6.15 the assessor is advocating. And I come up with a value of $600,000. I think 6.6% is within the range. This is would be classified as a 60-year-old strip mall in an older part of St. Vital. I can tell you from my experience, a national chain would not look at this property. That's my submission.
Thank you. Ms. Martin's questions, Mr. Leslie.
Yes. I'm wondering if you believe that it is fair to apply $11 a square foot across the board when you take into consideration that the restaurant does not have the same exposure to St. Mary's as the other business. Some of the spaces in the basement, which is there an elevator in this building?
Not that I'm aware of.
So there would be limited access to the basement.
Yes.
So do you believe that it is fair to have the same rental rate on space that does not have the same exposure, that there's limited access to, and that perhaps they don't have the same drive-by or same power? Do you feel that's fair?
Well, I used $11 a square foot in my workup. Mm-hmm. I think that's more than generous when the actual is $8.72 a square foot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Knight,
No questions at this time.
Mr. Boretsky.
I have no questions, no.
I just have a couple questions. Mr. Leslie, I'm looking at your, I'm not sure what page you did, but you got the final value for 600,000 leasable area, 4,528 square feet. And then you got underneath there 39, is it 39,483?
463.
463. Okay. Okay, so, okay,
Well, actually, yeah, it works out to be $8.60 a square foot. Because the basement space is, there's some basement space included.
okay.
But that's just actual. My workup is based on $11 a square foot. Potential.
So. What
That
you're
would be just in square feet then.
so why did you conclude a cap rate of 6.6?
The 6.6 was, as I said, derived from the previous reference application where 7.05 was used by the department.
Okay.
Can I ask another question? Sorry.
Sure, man, go ahead.
So back to what you were just saying, the leasable area 4528, but your 44, the projected revenue 44,110 at $11 a square foot is actually based on 4,010 square feet, correct?
Right.
Okay,
I don't think I included the basement in it.
okay. But that's what the assessor did too, based on 4,010 square feet. Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
In your calculation to come up with this $8 and change per square foot, are you factoring in the rent reduction for the one tenant? And are you also factoring in that the government funded assistance grant or financial support that they checked off they received?
No, I used your model. The only thing I changed was the cap rate.
No, when you're looking at the actual here. With the
the number I used was 39,463. I did not include any adjustments.
Okay, so that's not taking into account the rent assistance that they received.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Summation, either party?
No, thank you.
Mr. Leslie? No?
In this particular property, I've accepted the model rather than the actual net income because it's such an unusual property. And the only difference that I believe I see, I've used $11 a square foot rather than what the assessor is using. And then I've changed the cap rate from 6.15 to 6.6, which is roughly a half a point less than what was used. Well, not half a point, but 0.05 less than what was used in the last
Yeah, but
reference.
it's a different reference here too, so, you know, we can't take that into consideration. All right.
Yes, but when we're coming up with estimates, there must be some basis for deriving those estimates, and that, in all honesty, that was my basis for deriving my 6.6%.
We'll go on to the last one on the docket, which is 1881 Portage Avenue. Ms. Martins, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. This is roll number 0704111200. 1881 Portage Avenue. For the reference date of April 1st, 2021, the assessed value is $6,413,000. The parcel use on this is neighborhood shopping center. We have 4 buildings, 9 premises, all 1 story. The actual years built ranges from 1964 to 1987, with effective years built from 1986 to 1987. We have wall heights from 8 to 22 feet. The land area is 76,508 square feet, with a plan area of 29,059 square feet. Now on this one, if I can please have everyone go to the last page of my submission. This property is a bit, has a lot going on. So the picture on the top shows the family foods. So that's one of the buildings. And if you look down, you can see the other little strip in the corner, and you can see the Tim Hortons. And then the picture on the bottom shows, if you're driving past on Portage Avenue, it shows the Domo, the strip mall, the family foods far in the back, and the Tim Hortons in the corner. Just so we have a bit of an understanding of this property when we're talking about it. And if you go 1 page back, page 19, this is the overhead view showing that the property is at the corner of Ferry and Portage Avenue. And it is where you see the red outlines, it's both of those. So you see that the family foods has parking in front and to the side, and it appears to be a separate property, but it is not. It is considered one property, where the strip is all the way to the corner. You've got the Domo in the front, and you've got the Tim Hortons on the other corner of the portion of the property that is directly on Portage Avenue. So if we flip back to page 3, since there's a lot going on this property, we have several different tenant classes. Now we've got C1. If you compare to page 5, we have retail warehouse, C1, and that ranges from $10 to $11.50. And we have C4, which is standard restaurant, which is $19.40 and $20. And we have C2, which is standard finish, which goes from $18 a square foot to $19.75 a square foot. On the next page, we have what is the Domo, and it's as a kiosk with pump. The leasable area on that is 101 square feet. And we've got the rent per square foot at $299.28, giving us a potential income of $30,227. With a vacancy of 2%, that gives us our effective gross income of $29,622. And then the expenses at 3% and a shortfall at $6 per square foot, giving us an NOI of $28,721 with an overall capitalization rate of 5.35%, giving us a capitalized value of $536,841. On this one, we've got some additional building value of $60,000, which gives us an estimated value after adjustments at $597,000. And that, if you look on page 6, that is income stream 1. For income stream 2, if we look on page 5, we have leasable area of 29,487 with a potential rent of $462,000, not $492. We've then applied a 5% vacancy loss, 3% expenses with a shortfall of $9 per square foot, giving us an NOI of $412,917. On this, we have a capitalization rate of 7.10%, giving us the capitalized value of $5,815,732, which rounds to $5,816,000. If we look over on page 6, the two income streams are added, which gives us the $6,413,000. Thank you.
I thank you. Mr. Leslie, questions?
Did you have an opportunity to inspect the property? I see you got the pictures.
I did get pictures. Actually, I got the pictures off of Google. I have not inspected the property officially.
No, I don't have any questions.
Right, thank you. Ms. Knight,
No questions, no.
Moretsky,
Yeah, the one property on page 5, or the tenant class fast food, that would be the Tim Hortons then?
Yes, that would be the Tim Hortons.
So that seems very high for the rent. Is that normal for a fast food restaurant?
That is normal for a Tim Hortons or any of the such national brands, yes.
All right, so you
In fact, it's a little
basically,
sorry. In fact, it's a little on the lower side because that Tim Hortons does not have a drive-through.
oh, okay, so it would even be more usually.
Yes,
So you combined all of the that warehouse, that's family foods, and the strip mall into stream number 2, and then the gas station in stream number 1.
yes.
And why there's quite a discrepancy in the cap rates between the 2 streams. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes. These have different property type class. And if you're looking at a neighborhood shopping center, which does not necessarily include any type of gas kiosk, this is quite typical to the other properties that we've discussed today. And even though it's somewhat divided up, if you look at the similarities that we have between the retail warehouse, which is a grocery store, and then the strip, which has the different stores in it, including a restaurant, and I believe there's a hair place. I'm not 100% sure on the tenants. And quite frequently, you will have neighborhood shopping centers that have, a fast food place off in the corner of their parking lot. Whereas a gas kiosk, we value those quite differently because there's a very, very small space. If you look at any typical domo, there's, you don't have the customers coming in and out. So it's a different way of doing it. And also because we do value them somewhat differently. If you're looking at the income is actually quite low compared to what might be generated from a gas kiosk. And the risk involved with that, if you're looking at the risk involved in purchasing, especially if you're taking into consider any COVID, anytime you drive past a gas station, the risk of the tenants or ability to generate income or whether or not they'll have to close. And especially because with a property like this, it's not dependent on whether any of the other occupants are closed or if any of the other occupants are having struggles, or let's say the family foods was vacant. That's not going to negatively impact the income producing power of a gas station kiosk.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, somebody else wanted to talk.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you come back to me afterwards, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had highlighted it, but I forgot to ask the question. On page 4, and I am, so you, page 4 and 5, you split the gas kiosk from the standard leasable space. Is that correct?
Yes,
And on page 4, you do a workup based on potential rent in the standard methodology, derive a net operating income, cap it at 5.35%, and then you add additional building value. What is that? That's $60,000 of value.
Is that the pumps?
that's the pumps. The 101 square feet is the kiosk itself. That's just the little area, the little store that's indoors.
Right?
And then the 60,000 is the gas pumps.
So you're assessing chattels.
It's also, it's also the things that they have to put in order to put the gas pumps. They have to put the cement and they have to put all of that to make it available. If you're talking about somebody vacating and taking their domo elsewhere, they still have to have the gas, the cement, and all of the things that are there available. It's standard and it's equitable. This is how we value all of the kiosks.
So this is, you, in all your gas kiosks, you're adding a value, some nominal value. Is it always the same 60,000?
No, some of them have canopies over top. So
it's the gas pumps, the canopies, that fixture, there is a value ascribed to it and it's added to the value.
yes.
Has it been tested at the municipal board?
I have not
I don't know.
thought to look into that. It's pretty standard.
I've seen where they've that 60,000 is probably the bottom of the barrel for the pumps, because there's all kinds of pumps. There's double pumpers and
there's tanks underneath.
Yeah.
There's a lot of.
So it's the way the city has done it always in the past. So like you say, it's a chattel.
I know that I've done assessments in the hotel industry and they removed the business component out of the
We're valuing hotels completely different and their issues completely differently than we are a domo gas pump or a domo gas.
right. And so I guess this is another anomaly. There is a building component added to the value.
Yes.
Okay.
Just, I'm not sure if this one has does this one have doesn't have a big canopy. No, it doesn't have a canopy.
All right. Bill, we're coming back to you.
Right on, okay. The income statement, again, is there's adjusted net income of $408,000. Sorry, I kind of forgot. Are we still asking questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That seems to be consistently lower than what the model always projects. When I say consistently, I mean with respect to the other properties with this same owner. But you always seem to be. We are all, not you, but the income always seems to be, the actual income always seems to be maybe like 20% or so, 15% lower than what the model projects. What would be your explanation for that?
As part of the model, we don't allow leasing commissions. So that's one issue that would create the expenses to be higher than what we have, than what the department allows for. What else here? So the landlord's work. So if we're looking at the landlord's work, which what landlord's work are we doing? Is there anything there that should be amortized? If you're looking at just the statement, we're not sure, because some of the items should be amortized. We do have amortized deferred building exterior, which is good. But if we're looking at this one, does it show? It shows the income from government grant, and there's rent abatement. Now, which of these are rent abatement that's applied to the government grant? Which of this is, if we don't take into account some of the other, when a landlord decides that they're going to be not charging rent, any of those additional, we don't take into account as far as valuation, because that's an expense that is brought on by management style, management decisions, which is not something that a purchaser might take into consideration. So if I was going to go with the actual NOI, I would want to do a 3-year stabilized on this to see what is actually applicable for this year and what is stabilized over a number of years. Because some of these, if the expenses for repair and maintenance are significantly low one year, but very, very high the next year, these are things that perhaps should be are anomalies, or perhaps should be amortized, or should be looked at closer. Just giving us a 1-year statement does not adequately reflect what is going on with the building. That should be applied as saying that this is, definitely a market income, a market expense, and that it shouldn't be looked at in a more balanced way. This is a 1-year snapshot. If we're looking at developing a capitalization rate, we don't look at a 1-year snapshot. We look at a number of years and do stabilization.
So why couldn't you ask for 3 consecutive years? You get a more stabilized picture of it.
While ideally, if we're doing individual valuations, doing a 3-year stabilized would be an excellent way of getting a more accurate number. However, I think it's perhaps not feasible when we're doing computer assisted mass appraisal for the entire city, and taking every income producing property in the entire city and saying, okay, now we're going to sit someone down at the computer and do a 3-year stabilized evaluation of every property. That's not computer assisted mass appraisal, and we apply mass appraisal in Winnipeg.
Well, you give the actual enough weight that you require the owner to submit it. So
No, we're not giving the actual enough weight for that. We're requiring that the constituents provide us with income and expense value numbers so that we know the numbers that we can use to create our model. So we aren't asking for income and expense information to apply this to each individual property. We're asking for that so that we have actual numbers that we can use to create a model, so that our model is representative of what is actually happening in our city.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to go in circles here, but again, I think if you wanted more accurate information, you're saying that a few years would give you more stabilized value. So why can't you put that stabilized value into the model? Anyways, I'm not going to go any further with that.
We don't just have 1 year of income and expense. That's why we request the income and expense. We don't just request, okay, this is the year we need. We request the income and expense, and we put that information into the system. So the model does use multiple years to come up with appropriate values and appropriate expenses and appropriate rents. And we use that depending on the areas, and we find all of the factors that are appropriate for our model. by asking for the income and expense, expecting that every person that sends in an income and expense, that number is what is going to be used to value their property. That's actual appraisal. That's not mass assessment.
Okay, fair enough. Again, I'm going back to this effective year built. I guess I can't really wrap my head around why, regardless of whether there's other properties, buildings, when you come up with an effective year built for this whole entire property that you're considering, why wouldn't you have just 1 year? You know,
okay, if you go
here's
to
all the buildings, here's how big they are. How old is the whole property here? Because that's what it's considering the whole property, right?
well, yes. However, if we go over to page 20, you'll see that there are a number of buildings. Now, the age of the Tim Hortons will influence the rent for the Tim Hortons, whereas the age for the building that has the ultra cuts, and I'm not sure what it is in the corner there, but that little strip mall that's on the other side of Domo, the age of that building will influence the rents on the tenants in that building. Whereas the age of the family foods will influence the rent on the retail warehouse. So if we say, okay, you know what, that's it. We're going to say that everything is built in 1987, then the buildings that were built older and haven't had as many upgrades, then those tenants, that rent will be significantly higher. As opposed to if we said, okay, well, we'll have everything that is on that property built out 1964, then all of the rents will be significantly lower. So if you're asking on one hand that I should take the actual income and expense rents that are submitted to us, and I should apply those rents to each of the premises.
I'm not saying either way, but you're supposed to do anything. Yeah.
But if we apply the actual years built, then we can have much more accurate rents when we're looking at the model and we're looking at comparable properties.
I guess it's just more of a procedural thing that I'm asking about because, you know, this is the property description and it's an overall description. It just seems like, you know, that you could put all of that information into one pile and come up with one number. You know, that's my point. Rather than spreading it out, it doesn't really tell us much. You know?
Well, it tells you lots. It tells you that there's 4 different buildings on this property, and that they were.
No, it doesn't. Effective years built is effective year built, right? So.
Well, yes, but there's 4 buildings. So, if you were in my shoes, which year would you apply for all of the 4 buildings? I don't know which year I should apply to all of the 4 buildings.
Well, you can. You can combine all the information. But anyways, that's how you do it. So that's fine. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay, I think Ms. Martins, is there a difference between, you know, as we're going through here, is there a difference rate capitalization wise for a strip mall and a shopping center?
Somewhat, yes.
Yeah. And so but also what comes into play at that point with the age factor?
Well, if we're looking at strip malls, we look at, that's one of the features that's in the model, and it will take numbers from other strip malls. If we're looking at neighborhood shopping centers, it will take the numbers from other neighborhood shopping centers. So that's part of the joy of being model derived numbers, is that we're able to say, like, these are some of the characteristics that we can plug in, and that the computer will then look at and give us numbers.
Okay, so I'm just looking at all the properties that we're dealing with, and this has got the highest rate, the cap rate. So trying to look at whether it's classified as a shopping center. I would say so. And if I look at Pembina Highway 1717, and it's like almost like 52,000 square feet, and this is like 30. So,
but if we look at the features of this one, it does have a grocery store, which quite frequently, as we're looking at strip malls, a strip mall does not have a major anchor tenant, whereas a neighborhood shopping center, this one does have an anchor tenant. And if we look at page 5, you can see that if we're looking under potential rent, the retail warehouse is a very significant amount of their income.
mhm.
So having one tenant have the majority of the income, that does create somewhat more risk. So that would then increase. Because if, let's say, the family foods, sorry, losing my train of thought. If that one unit became vacant, then they would lose a significant amount of their rental income. So that does create more risk. So strip malls are usually smaller and are usually a little less, they have fewer tenants, so they're a little easier to buy. So there's usually a different demographic that's looking at buying those, whereas neighborhood shopping centers tend to have a big anchor tenant. So we've got that big anchor tenant right there. And that is desirable because it's one tenant that does generate the majority of the rent, but it's also higher risk in the situation where they might vacate.
I thank you, Ms. Martins. Mr. Leslie, your presentation.
I believe you all have a copy of my submission. And I appreciate Mr. Moretsky's questions. My client asked me the same question. Why do we have to appeal the subject property every reference cycle and have a decision rendered either by the board or a 15-1 agreement? And on page 2, you can see that he thinks I'm in partnership with the city of Winnipeg. We've been doing this since 1993 reference year. And the reason is the mass appraisal system does not take into account decisions of the Board of Revision. And so these properties that I'm appearing on behalf of are anomalies in the marketplace. And they normally don't have a Tim Hortons because Tim Hortons are pretty easy to value because the rate is always the same. What this particular property is, it's located in the older part of St. James, just prior to Deer Lodge, on Portage Avenue, across the street from St. James Collegiate. The retail warehouse was a Safeway that vacated. Unfortunately, the family foods occupy that space. As Ms. Martins has provided, there were additional buildings put on the site over a number of years up until 1987. A strip, I think the strip mall was the Tim Hortons was the last. There was a strip, a gas bar, and Tim Hortons. Now, on page 3, I've provided excerpts of the Municipal Assessment Act and for the purposes of why we're here. I can tell you that Ms. Martin is correct in regard to the grocery store. The world is changing. I have a client who had a mall with a grocery store. And when Sobeys bought the Safeway, they decided that they would close certain of those stores, as though they would not compete with their existing stores. And now you have 20,000 square feet vacant. And it's very difficult in these changing times to find a tenant that will occupy and conduct business in 20,000 square feet. And so with that risk attached to it, there's afforded a higher cap rate. I'm not sure when I look at the assessor's brief why I know why they put a separate stream for the gas bar, because that's just a land lease. I don't understand how you can assess chattels. That's contrary to the methodology. But I don't agree with the cap rates that the assessor has used on either stream. The retail warehouse, I believe, when such a large tenant, the risk attached to it. In my workup on page 5, I've used a cap rate of 7.5% on that stream. And I've taken the actual gross rent that they're earning, but I've deducted the Domo pad from that to put into a separate stream. And then I've deducted according to the methodology, 4% vacancy, $9 shortfall, 3% other, and come out with an NOI on my page 5 of $375,288. That's for everything but the Domo. The Domo lease is $37,950. So the $375,288 which when I take the $37,950, that's a total of $413,000. The actual NOI of this property is $408,000. And so in my workup, my projected NOI is similar to what the actual NOI is. And then I differ from the assessors. I'm using a higher cap rate, 7.5% versus 7.1%. This is an original Safeway 1964 that was converted to a Family Foods. That's the majority of the space. But it does also include the Tim Hortons and the strip mall. And then I've got the Domo gas bar. And what I've done is I've allowed no deduction on the Domo gas bar, $37,950, and I've capped it at 6%. The assessor is using 5.35. I really have a problem using such a low cap rate, given even in the reference date April 1st, 2021, when we're talking about a gas bar. The capitalization rate is intended to take a stream of future of revenue projected into the future and say this is what this property is worth. And I would say, much like I said about Blockbuster Video, and that gas bars have a limited future. And then you add to it the environmental risk of contamination to the property, which I have another file that's before the municipal board. And so I would suggest that the risk associated with a gas bar would require a much higher cap rate than 5.35. Now, I use 6% because it's within the parameters published by the department. And so I take those two streams, I get 5 million and 3,840 for the retail component. I get 632,500 for the gas bar component, and I get a value of 5,636,340. On page 6 is a copy of the Board of Revision order for the 2020 realty assessment, which was recommended by the department. This, as I said, this is a property that I appear every cycle because the mass appraisal system doesn't take into account these anomalies in the marketplace. Only purchasers do, because they look at all the things that are going on here, and Ms. Martins is correct. There's a lot going on this particular property. And I can tell you that, I can tell you that, this is an old Safeway that has been converted to its best and highest use. And I think a prudent purchaser is not going to pay more than $5,636,000. That's my submission.
Thank you. Spartans, questions?
Yes. Let's work backwards. So you're stating that the board order from last go around, I'm sorry, it was 5,348,000.
Right?
You're suggesting that this property is doing so poorly that when we're looking at an approximate average of 20% increases across the board when it comes to retail properties, that a 5% increase is the most appropriate for this property?
Yes, because we're looking at this property.
Okay.
We're not looking at all of Winnipeg.
Oh, sorry, so we're saying that a 5% increase is an appropriate increase for this property.
I'm saying that that's the value in the applicable reference date. If it works out to be 5%, so be it.
Okay. Now, part of that is taking into account the neighborhood. You were suggesting that this is a poor neighborhood?
I'm saying that this is a neighborhood. This is a older neighborhood, as indicated by that the original construction was 1964. But I would also say that my daughter lives in Deer Lodge, and it's a neighborhood that's going through transition.
Okay. Now, as far as within the neighborhood, that is an older neighborhood that is going through transition, is this property located on a busy street where the tenants would receive a significant amount of exposure to traffic?
It's located on Portage Avenue at Ferry Road. It's a busy. Okay. It's a busy area.
So, as far as neighborhood shopping centers, this might be a desirable location.
No.
There.
I think this is an area in transition. I think it's over 60, 70 years old. I think if in comparison, I'd rather have Pembina Highway.
Okay, so now let's look at the risk involved with the grocery store. Have you done any research as far as how COVID has impacted the different types of retail locations?
I believe grocery stores, from my experience, have done better than anyone.
So having the grocery store on there as opposed to being a negative might perhaps be a positive because they've done better than the other retail that is on the location.
Well, I think the risks associated with grocery stores, the grocery stores were fortunate during COVID, unlike some of the other retail. But you're talking about a locally owned chain competing with multinational operations. And so, if you want to talk into the business risk, I'd say there's a lot more risk associated with the family foods than with a Sobeys.
There. However, we already discussed that the capitalization rate is higher due to the property having a grocery store there, and it's already been taken into account that grocery stores have the inherent risk. Is that so you're saying that the capitalization rate, where we've already taken that into consideration, is not sufficient?
Right.
Okay, thank you. Now the gas kiosk. So we are looking at, with the capitalization rate, the possibility of revenue projected into the future, correct?
Right.
Now, when we're looking at this and the lowered capitalization rate, and the other factors that you mentioned, are you suggesting that that we should already be taking into account that there's a potential that we won't be selling gas at some point in the future when we switch over to electric cars and all of that? Are you suggesting that that should be taken into account for the capitalization rate with the effective date of April 1st, 2021?
I believe that's what cap rates do.
Okay, thank you. That is all.
I thank you. Ms. Knight, questions?
I do have a question in regards to the kiosk. So you're saying that the Domo kiosk, as opposed to the city, is just based on the revenue generated, not including the pad that's there for the like 60,000 that she's claiming for the pumps, correct?
My number of 5,636,000 does not include another 60,000 for
Right.
the pad, the pumps. That's correct.
And why is that?
I don't believe the pad and pumps belong to Domo. And I believe when the lease is over, they have to remove them at their expense.
Okay. Thank you.
I thank you. Bill?
Oh, yes. So if you were to, you have two cap rates there, 7.5 for the income, well, the main income stream, and then 6% for the kiosk. So you by chance have a blended cap rate anywhere in your possession?
No.
No, okay. That's my only question.
I thank you. I have no further questions. Either party wants summation?
No, thank you.
Leslie?
No, that's my submission. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Leslie, thanks for coming this morning. Thanks for your presentation and the results very soon. So have a pleasant day and thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Martins, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
You speeded up our hearing this morning. So thank you very kindly.
You're welcome.
So
Very patient, very patient. Thank you.
I think we've heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.